All right, to start this little talk of mine, quick question to the audience. What do you think? How much time did you spend in front of a screen today? Any guesses?
6 hours.
Not bad. Anything else? 10 hours? Yeah, not bad. Very close. A recent survey by Bitkom revealed that the average German adult spends 7.6 hours in front of a screen every day. During the pandemic, it was 10 hours, and the global average is actually 6.5 hours. So it's not much less. Really, humanity is spending a lot of time in front of screens. And obviously, at your workplace, you tend to be in front of big screens, and at home, in your private life, you tend to be in smaller screens. But overall, again, it's 7.6 hours every day on average. And that is a lot. It's basically half of your waking time you spend looking at screens. Now, screens is actually, I think, not the right term, because we don't look at a black mirror here. We look at software. And so we spend 7.6 hours every day looking at software. Again, this is a lot of time. And it's not really surprising. I mean, almost every part of our life is somehow touched by software. We paint, we write, we play games, we play music, we calculate, we communicate. There's an endless things to do with software. You can draw a number of conclusions out of this number, especially today, actually. But I'm a professor for interaction design here at the Fachhochschule Potsdam, just down the road. So my conclusions and my perspective has obviously a very, very strong design angle. And there are two things I would like to discuss right now. The first is, I really believe that software is the most dominant medium of our time. As I just said before, we use it for almost every part of our life. As I said, we write, we do different things, we met our life partner on software, we inform ourselves in software, book train tickets on software, and so on and so on. So it's not just a tool, it really is the most dominant medium of our time. The second observation I have is that most of the software we use is terrible. And at this point, I wanted to show, bad examples, but then I thought, no, I don't have to. You can just close your eyes, and everyone here in the room can immediately imagine this kind of ugly, pointless, and really incoherent software that we're confronted with every day. So I think the main point I want to make right now is we need better software. And in order to get there, I believe we have to radically rethink how we design software. And I really think that one of the key things to achieve that is more creativity. I think we need to apply the same amount of creativity and imagination that we usually would apply to any other medium in our world. And I think we should apply the same level of creativity and imagination to software. Which brings me to my next point, mathematics. Now, it's fairly safe to say that mathematics is one of the most successful and one of the oldest sciences out there. Euclid's Elements was written over 2,400 years ago, and it's still valid today, so that's really successful. However, despite its success, mathematics is dealing with a fundamental and I think really interesting and slightly uncomfortable philosophical problem. Is it discovered or is it invented? And that really is a very, very fundamental problem for mathematics. And I admit it's very, very academic, but I find it intriguing. So the basic question here is mathematics deeply ingrained in our reality? Do the rules and objects of mathematics exist outside of human experience? Or did we just make it up? Is it just an invention by mankind? Really interesting question, but I know all of you are asking yourselves, what does it have to do with design? Now, I would like to invite you to a thought experiment. What if design is actually discovered and not invented? And we all assume that design is a cultural activity, and it clearly is. And as such, we always think, well, it's obviously invented. We humans came up with it. We created different designs. But just as a thought experiment, what if this is not true? What if all possible designs, are already out there, outside of human experience? And it is our job to discover them by expanding and extending the design space. Let me talk you through an analogy. What if this design space is actually a landscape? So the design space is, we have seas, we have islands, we have forests and rivers and beaches, and, this is a space we know and we're comfortable with. And this is actually, in my analogy, this is the design space of software design or human interface design. This is our known world. In the middle, you can see Android Island and iOS Island. On the top left corner, you have the cliffs of Windows, and below that, the island of macOS, the barren islands of Metro and skeuomorphic design, and on the right, the cliffs of Game UI. So this is a known world, and the UX shipping lines are doing brisk trade between the 4 main islands, and this is it. This is a world we live in, we work in, and it's a pleasant space. It's not bad, fairly comfortable, but it's fairly limited. Now my question is, what happens if we set sail and if we venture to the borders of our known world and if we go beyond it? And suddenly we can see strange formations. We see cliffs and islands and mountains and glaciers and maybe entire continents. And obviously, a lot of these landscapes that you can see here, they're not inhabitable. There will be deserts and really very, very ice-cold plains and lots of places that we wouldn't really want to live in. But we will never find out if we don't set off and discover them. And we can even move further out. It's absolutely fine to stay on iOS Island for the rest of your life. But personally, I want to see volcanoes and mountains and beaches and jungles and cliffs. I want to see highlands and deserts, and let there be dragons. So my analogy ends here. But I believe that there's still an incredible amount of design that needs to be discovered. My students and my research team, we already try, to set sail and to venture to the borders of the known world. And I think we've already found some really interesting places. But the point I want to make here tonight is that I really believe it is our obligation as designers to push the boundaries and to discover these new places. And to discover places for information representation, for interaction, for new navigation patterns, for new metaphors, and so on and so on. So I think it is our job to discover new things and to push the boundaries. I call this design approach speculative software. And I think at the very core of speculative software is the emphasis on creativity and critical reflection. I always encourage my students to question the status quo, to consider ethical implications. And I always encourage them to challenge conventions, to explore radical design approaches, and to envision new forms of digital interaction, and to always question the established norms. Now, at this point, I hope you're curious, and you probably want to see some examples. So here we go. I brought a couple of examples from the last few years. Most of them are works from my students from the last 2 years, and I will go very, very quickly through some of them. This project, Cosmos, is an application for virtual reality, and it visualizes the relationship of words in texts. So you can directly, if you put on your glasses, dive into a semantic network. Completely different project, Birthday. Birthday is a speculative design project that tries to explore the possibilities of social media. And it kind of asks the question, what happens if social media will rediscover certain kind of visual cultures of youth culture, like, punks or mods or rockers? So what if the social media would become much, much more visual and you would kind of be part of a specific group on social media? So this is kind of visualization of that community. By the way, birthday is the day when you kind of announce yourself and that you become part of this one of the specific communities. But speculative software doesn't have to be completely disconnected from commercial software. The project ProLanes explores how visual interfaces can support individual employees and complete workflows in a big company. So instead of kind of hiding everything in tables, the processes and the people involved here are made visible. And you can really see kind of like a management flowchart and connected people and connected objects here on this flowchart. The user manual, very conceptual again, a bit weird, but I really like it. It explores the relationship between humans and machines. And it does so by using a very, very unique visual surface / interface that is kind of accessed from both sides, from the machine and from the user. Or, I think also a really, really great project, the Ethical Consumer Index, very conceptual, and it's based on a very simple assumption that in the future we'll have access to all supply chains for all consumer goods. So the question here is, how can you kind of visualize that? If you buy a chocolate bar, and you can directly navigate from your shopping app to the source of the ingredients of your chocolate bar. You can immediately see under which conditions the cocoa was farmed and how much money the individual farmers really received from your one chocolate bar you just bought. So the aim here is to create a super transparency for all kinds of consumer goods. Again, different project, but also very conceptual. The Fashion Forge uses very consciously very, very bright and expressive visual language to communicate a very experimental idea. The question here is, what if you have a machine that would allow you to prompt your own fashion? So you would use generative AI not only to produce images, but really produce a piece of garment. And you can prompt it here, and not only that, you can also recycle your existing clothing, you chuck it into the top of the machine, and it produces new garment based on your prompts. Another, I think, super relevant project, also a bit related to the previous one, the image authentication software. This software explores kind of the problem of generated AI imagery. I mean, in the future, or already today, we always have to question ourselves, is this a real image? Was this photo taken by a person, by a photo camera, or is it completely generated by an AI? So the students here explored different strategies, how we can evaluate the truthfulness of an image by applying different methodologies. And they also translated in a piece of software that kind of demonstrates what kind of strategies we currently are and how you can really qualify and quantify the truthfulness of the images. In this project, I'm not quite sure if I find it funny or depressing. This is the Soma browser, and the Soma browser wants to make you happy. So it only shows you pleasant information. And if you search for something problematic like climate change, it shows you the best beaches in Brandenburg, or the weather forecast, which is going to be great. And if you want to dive deeper into certain topics, they make sure that you're kind of protected from the evil information and from the difficult information out there, and you always have to look at funny cat videos before you can really read something that's a bit more depressing. The next piece is, again, it's a piece for virtual reality, and it's more a poetic piece. It's a production of Schnitzler's Traumnovelle, and when you put on your VR headset, when you enter this space, you're immediately in a world that is just black and white. And you have to navigate through an invisible labyrinth of black and white areas, and you can constantly discover new texts, which are passages from the book. So in this sense, this is more really virtual reality as a theater. It just kind of allows you to access and to explore and experience a text in a very, very different form. These are just some examples from the students. And we've reached the end of this little journey. But as I mentioned earlier, I really think software has become the most dominant medium of our time. And it's no longer simply a tool or a technical entity. And as such, I really think we need to approach it from a different, more cultural side. I believe we have to radically reconsider how we design software. And throughout the centuries, I mean, we applied a lot of creativity, ingenuity, and experimentation to all kinds of media that surrounds us. And I think we should apply the exact amount of creativity to software. So to link it back to the overall topic of this TED conference, I want more. I want more creativity, more curiosity, and more imagination when it comes to the design of software. I want more experiments and a greater openness. Thank you. I want more experiments and a greater openness to alternative designs. And to go back to my analogy, I want more exploration. I think there's still a lot to discover. Thank you.